With John Mauldin. At this time, please silence your cell phones if you have any, and during the question and answer time, if you could speak into the mic. Thank you.
Let's see. Good, because you guys can hear me if I talk like this from the back on this mic. I don't need to hold it up. Because I think the audio is taking all the sessions. I think the mic is picking that up, though. Yeah, I think the mic's picking us up. They're hearing me be back. And I'm not certain I want this audio taped. For most of you, I gave your, how many of you are readers? Okay, so you've all been given fair warning that this is a speech that nobody would pay me for. I would never have enough nerve to charge for it because I'm going to just do what I disdain Doug Casey doing so often, which is to philosophize and to talk about what he thinks. And so I'm going to try to hold that short so we can go to Q&A and talk about what's far more important, which is what you think about and what you're interested in. The title I gave my speech, essay, whatever it's going to be, was The Invisible Hand, Evolution, and Why I'm an Economic Atheist, in an attempt to be provocative on a Saturday afternoon at the end of a conference. I decided to actually come here because Mark's constantly badgering me to come, and I constantly say I don't go anywhere for free, which you actually have to not only come for free, you have to pay your own way. And he wanted me to actually register for the conference, and I just drew the line. No, Mark, you've got enough money. But I looked on the list of speakers, and I go, wow, these are a lot of my friends, and I am staying home a lot, kind of, sort of, for me anyway. And so I'm really not going on vacation, no Italy villas or anything this summer. So Shane is being stuck, my fiance, I will introduce it to this crowd. We're slowly letting readers know that I have a life outside of writing. And so she's been stuck in Dallas with me, so she does like to come to get out a little bit. So I've brought her here, and she's been enjoying it, and she happens to be a rabid libertarian. So be careful, she bites. Probably not this crowd. And you can stand up and say hi, Shane. Anyway, I am lucky. I'd like to say it was brilliant choices, but I enjoyed meeting with a lot of friends. Bill Bonner. How many of you know who Bill Bonner is? Okay, we met in 1982. I wrote about it in my letter that was going out this afternoon. I actually spent my time in my room, but I spent just one meeting, one friend, old friend after another, and a lot of you that I'm looking at now and recognize that I would like to spend some time with. And if any of you want to go down to Starbucks after this, we'll do that. So let's get to what I'm wanting to talk about. When I think about where we are in the world today and why I think it's going to be a mess, you can point to, well, central banks and government policies, but it's actually, at the end of the day, it's a failure to understand the nature of the system that we're in. We sometimes call it free market capitalism, but that's not really what we are. We are actually about, and have been for the last 300 years, and really for the last 10,000, an innovating culture, an innovating world. It's more about innovationism, especially in the last 300 years, And it's been the decentralization of production that has allowed the prosperity. And America is the epitome, or was, the epitome of decentralization. If you didn't like central governments, you just moved west. And you got to do your own thing until we ran out of ocean. God, here's the guy that should be giving us philosophy, George Gilder. I can't believe you would even walk into my rambling. I was deigning to tell him at lunch yesterday, why he was wrong about gold and scarcity and money having to have a scarcity factor. Money doesn't have to have, I'm going to ramble here. This is my speech, it's free. I've warned you. So I get to rebut in public. But what he made, and he made a very cogent argument, which he always does, is that information is the true money, is the true source of wealth. And we'll get to that in a minute, because that's where I just think his book, and he's summarized it much better in The Scandal of Money, which is a new book which you should read. But money doesn't have to be scarce in order to be valuable. Bitcoin has the same genetic flaw in a global modern society that gold does. Not unsurprising, because the guy that created Bitcoin did two things. One was utterly brilliant and will change the world, and that's the blockchain. The blockchain may be the most powerful innovation, technology-wise, since the internet, which randomly, the internet just kind of randomly evolved. The blockchain just burst on the scene, and we're trying to figure out what to do with this new toy, kind of like, I guess, the internet. And then because we don't know who Satoshi was, George was at my villa in Italy, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago? 2 years. 2 years ago, and he was struggling with writing his book on Bitcoin, and he says, nobody's ever talked with Satoshi. Nobody's ever met this guy. We get this, he's got these vague postings on the internet, and then he's disappeared. And I said, George? And he was trying to figure out how to write about him. And I said, George, I'll give you your writing conceit. Because George is kind of like me in a sense. I'm a wannabe. Bill Bonner and George are truly storytellers. They convey information just like other people do, but they tell a story. Someday, when people ask me what I do, there's strangers walk up, I say, I'm a writer. I really want to be able to say, I'm a storyteller. Now, if you tell people that, they go, oh, you're Irish. But you want to drink mine. No. I said, George, go back over into the alcove over there tonight, late at night, at midnight, and Satoshi will appear from the mists, and he will talk with you. And you can write about your dreams and conversation with Satoshi in the middle of Italy, which he in fact did. And because we're making it up, but Satoshi was evidently, like some people in this room, hardcore libertarian gold bugs. And he designed Bitcoin to reflect that conceit. Now, not a bad start, but Bitcoin will never become a ubiquitous currency because it doesn't have the necessary one condition that is not scarcity, but it is ubiquity. It has to be everywhere and instantly available in a modern society. And that means that somebody will, and there are people, these meetings are going on while we're sitting here, somebody will take the blockchain and tie it to a basket of commodities and currencies and global everything. Throw the whole basket in there so that it affects, it reflects global GDP. Because that's what in fact, that's where our growth comes from, is global GDP from a global scale, from all of us. Now, we get to choose bits and pieces and try to outperform global GDP. Sometimes we're good, sometimes not so good. But there are people like Warren Buffett, to use a clear example, and others that are pretty good at beating global GDP. So, but in general, that's all we get. And so if you had a currency that was instantly available as global GDP, everything in the basket, then that means that its value is pretty much only going to grow a little bit over time. It can't inflate beyond global GDP. And in fact, many of the components, when you choose commodities and other things, are inherently deflationary. So it'll give you a pretty enduring store of value, and you can have 50 banks, global banks, can create that currency if they can agree on what that currency is. You just say, okay, it's going to be these 50 different things in these percentages. This is now currency. We'll meet back in 10 years and see if we need to add something or adjust something. And it would be a minute adjustment, and you have to have the majority, a super majority of people approving it. And then now you have your new currency with little adjustments. You say you can't adjust the currency more than 3% every 10 years with new baskets, because we don't know what's going to show up in the next 10 years after that we may want to add. So then you would have an enduring store of value. And by the way, Google and Facebook could create the same currency and compete with you. They have an advantage in that they understand who the markets are, and they have software engineers that can drive down value. Now, the banks have an advantage in that they can hire software engineers, but they understand how to drive down cost in trading, because ultimately this is a trading currency, and they understand transactions. I don't care who wins. You, as a currency user, don't care who's win. If you want to hold dollars, you can. If you want to hold lira or whatever you want to hold, but so you can move in and out, and it becomes fluid. So the currency of choice becomes what we want it to be. That's what will happen, and I think that will be the currency within 20 years. This stuff right here, and I know some of you love using cash, and so do I, but the whole I'm writing a book on where the world will go in 20 years, and one chapter is on privacy and the future of privacy. There will be none. The choice that we want to have is how the people who have access to all of our information, they will have access to everything unless you want to move to a mountaintop and disconnect, and that's no fun. The choice is what we allow them to do with that information. And that's going to be the big fight over privacy. Not whether they can have it, not whether we have any, but what can they do with it? And that's where we need Rand Paul's concept of judges. That's where, I mean, did Rand not give the best speech you've ever heard him give yesterday?
Yes, he did.
Where was that man during the campaign? Seriously. You know, Newt gave the best speeches after the campaign too. I don't know what this is about post-campaigns.
They kick out the consultants.
Huh?
They kick out the consultants.
They kicked out the consultants, yes, okay. Now, going back to where we were. Adam Smith came along in 1776. Something else happened about that time. But he published The Wealth of Nations, and then a few other books. But basically, what Adam Smith did 100 years before Charles Darwin and before evolution, he postulated an evolutionary market. Because what he said, it was the invisible hand. And it's really the interactions of millions of people making decisions in their own best interest. And we were at the beginning of true decentralized innovationism, not capitalism. Capitalism is just a mechanism for allocating capital, and it's devolved into crony capitalism. But it's innovationism, which George quantifies and talks about, but not in that particular term, though he'll probably start using that term now. But I stole it from somebody else, so I'll have to figure out where you can footnote it.
You can distribute the royalty.
I'll contribute it to whoever. What Smith was talking about was the evolutionary hand, and he was saying this was a good thing. Fascinatingly, Darwin comes along and says, well, I see evolution in biology. This was counter to the belief system of people who said, no, God created. Okay, clash. Fast forward another 100+ years to today. I find it fascinating that generally conservatives on the right adore Adam Smith. We believe in free markets and the evolution of markets. But we have trouble cuddling up to evolutionary biology. And fascinating.
Your tapes can be.
Huh?
You should charge extra for your tape.
Okay. Pat, would you see if you could go and get them to shut that off? Yeah, see if you can get them to just point out that there is a session going on here. I want to dance with hearing that music. And now you have those on the left that say, oh, you creationists are crazy, but we believe in the evolution, but we don't believe in the evolution of markets. We want to control that. We think that you can only have a controlled market. And it's really Matt Ridley's concept of the evolution of everything. Everything is evolutionary at its core. And when you start putzing around with the model in any significant way, you mess up. Now, you can have, for instance, we breed cattle because we want certain traits. We breed corn, if you will, because we want certain traits. And I don't believe in a laissez-faire, totally anarchist world. I actually want society, the government, in a limited fashion, to be the police, to make people play nice in the sandbox. I don't want to give banks an unlimited capacity to rape and pillage. I want there to be rules. I want there to be far less leverage in the system than there is today, but that's a matter of debate. I want people to not do things that take advantage of others. I just want the playing field to be level. But that's different than saying we're going to put money in here and people that are closer to the spigot, i.e. banks and people like a lot of people in this room that have stocks that see their assets go up and the average person doesn't get it. Watch Japan. Japan is running out of bonds to buy. 4 years ago, when I was saying the Japanese Bank of Japan would buy all the bonds, I had no idea, it never occurred to me that by 2016, later this year, sometime no later than the middle of next year, they're going to run out of willing sellers of bonds. Because their pension companies, their insurance companies, and a lot of foreign investors are betting the Japanese are going to take rates down and they're going to be able to sell those bonds back into the market for capital gains. they're going to have to create something because they really, 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 really want inflation. We could see helicopter money coming, I mean, true money put into the hands of people first coming out of Japan as a massive monetary experiment. My side bet is that for the purposes of Keynesian theory, it will work. That doesn't mean it's a good thing. That will mean the central bankers will say, this was a success, because they get to define what success is. Do you understand? Janet Yellen just last week told us that it appears that negative interest rates have had an impact, by which she means, yeah, this is something we're going to really consider, even as she was saying, we will not consider it. Of course, I mean, it's like, there's a reason the Fed is always wrong. And it's actually a political reason rather than just the fact that their models are stupid, which is, they also are. It is that you cannot have the central bank forecasting a recession. You cannot have the CBO saying, we're going to have a recession in 2019. Really? The government says that? So you always have to always forecast better, brighter, bigger, better. Which means you have to consider the source and never pay any attention to that. But the problem is, if you plan for no recessions and you get one, then that means if you're a government, all of your projections are not very good. And so but what will happen, and what we have as a situation now, is that the central bankers of the world have adopted something called Keynesianism. Now, a lot of you nod and we go, ooh, that's the bad guys. But I am here to tell you, if you took Austrian economics to its logical conclusion and ran a country by Austrian economics, it would still drive us into an alley and we would get mugged. Same with monetarism, same with any economic theory. That's why I am an economic, well, the problem is, now I get ready to offend most of the people in the room. You religiously believe your economic views. And by religiously believe, I mean you believe them. And that's why the other guys are wrong. In the same way that you have your religious views. People ask me sometimes, John, are you an atheist? And I go, absolutely not. It requires way too much faith. I mean, you have to be certain if you're an atheist. And there's a lot of things I am in the world at my advanced age, and one of them is not certain anymore. I am no longer certain. Oh my God, he's taping this with a camera. Yeah, hello. How much do you want for that video? The reality is that the markets are far more complex. What we postulated 100 years ago, 80 years ago, 60 years ago, depending on which of the three major economic theories you want to look at. If you look at it through the filter of current economic on the edge thinking, like George postulates, and I absolutely agree, that information theory should be the driver of whatever our understanding of economics is. I also believe that, not chaos theory, but the complexity theory. Thank you, George. It's good to have a conscience brain with me. I should carry him around more often. How many of you have read some of the stuff that's coming out of the Santa Fe Institute on complexity theory? A few of you. More of you should. Not surprisingly, is complex. But What Adam Smith assumed was that it was the combination, the evolution of markets in the world that created markets, created freedom, created prosperity. 1,500 years later, some Frenchman said, "We don't know how to feed all of Paris, but it just happens. Paris gets fed every day, unless, of course, they're having a revolution, which they do from time to time." I mean, 330 million people in America cooperate in making micro decisions that becomes macro decisions. And you cannot explain that in a model. Every economic system, up until recently, assumes equilibrium. And if you look at Adam Smith, if you come to Darwin, if you look at the world around you, there is no equilibrium. But in order to model economics, in order to model an economy, you have to make assumptions. And the core key assumption is a dynamic equilibrium. They put the word dynamic in front of equilibrium to make it seem like it's changing. But they have to fix something. They have to make a lot of assumptions. And in those assumptions, they assume away the real world. Further, the underlying mathematics that they are using are incapable of describing the real world. They're not complexity theory. They're not based on Claude Shannon's information theory. Because it's the signal within the noise that creates profit, that creates opportunity. It is the multiplayer game theory of Nash that allows for the interactions, and we just really can't program multiplayer game theory on that vast a basis. We can make assumptions about how the economy grows, but if you make those assumptions, if you start following the path that I'm talking about down that road, you have to come back and say, wow, setting the price for the most valuable commodity in the world, which is what the Federal Reserve does when they set interest rates, because the interest is the price of money, is thwarting the evolutionary purpose of the market. Now, would the market be more momentarily volatile if we didn't control interest rates, if we let the market set the interest rates? And absolutely. It would drive banks and investors and all sorts of people nuts until they could figure out a way to arbitrage it away and to figure out how to play it. Okay, but I guarantee you the transition from we're telling you what interest rates are to we're going to let you tell us what interest rates are will be bumpy. And because people have gotten used to 12 people sitting around a table making a decision, or now there's only 10 because there's 2 Fed governors waiting to be appointed by the new president. Trump has said that he's going to rein in the Federal Reserve, and I'm going, okay, if he gets reelected the second time, maybe he'll have a chance to make enough appointments to do that. I think Janet Yellen, doesn't she last through into his next, I mean, you know, you just can't get rid of these guys fast enough. And that's assuming he even appoints good guys, okay, that would let the markets set interest rates. We are thwarting the evolutionary principles that both Adam Smith and the rest of the world follows. It's that innovationism, it's the ability to create and produce. Keynesianism has made the assumption that consumption is the driver of the markets. And they're dead wrong. It's income is what we should be looking for. Income is the driver, and we should be trying to figure out not how to increase assumption, but how to create and allow for more income. If you have enough income, people will figure out how to take that income and use it to produce stuff that people will consume. That's what drove the markets when they were relatively free and we were still moving west. People would go, oh, I can open a store, I can be a barber, I can do whatever. Doesn't have to be Elon Musk every time. I don't believe any economic theory. I'm very skeptical about the stuff that I do believe. Because I'm skeptical to the point that I know that I shouldn't be telling people how to run their lives and run their markets. That's got to be a decision for each of us. I'm cognizant enough to know that we need a level playing field. I don't want you cheating, okay? I don't want you taking advantage of me, and you don't want me cheating or taking advantage of you. We just want to have the same opportunities for everyone. I don't want central bankers and Wall Street bankers getting access to the money before I do. I want the money to be created evenly throughout the markets. And so, I don't believe in any of it, in the sense that the Federal Reserve, and this is where I'll close and we'll go to questions. The Federal Reserve, central bankers are Keynesian, and they are true believers. And when we go into the next recession, they're already telegraphing it. They want to have more quantitative easing and more QE. Why? Because they believe that it's working now, because they define their own terms of success. The correlation of whatever growth we've had and their policies, they see as evident proof that their policies are working, rather than what I see, which is that's just a bunch of free market businessmen making decisions and trying to figure out how to get away from what you guys are doing to messing up the markets. They have financialized the markets where it's cheaper to buy your competition than to compete. It is cheaper to buy your stock back than to invest. Rather than allowing interest rates, and none of you can make any money in your fixed income portfolios. They're trying to force you out on the risk curve. And I see enough gray hair in this room. You shouldn't be, and some of you with no hair, you shouldn't be moving out the risk curve. And yet you can't live on what you can get without moving out the risk curve. That is a world turned upside down. That is repression, and it is evil and wrong. And they don't believe that. And that's why they're going to take us further down the rabbit hole during the next recession. That's why we have to figure out a new way to handle our portfolios, a new way to structure them. And this is something I'm going to be announcing in the fourth quarter. I think that we no longer want to diversify among asset classes. We want to diversify among trading strategies. Now, 10 years ago, I would have said, well, that means mostly hedge funds. Except that hedge funds are expensive and they're not very accessible, and not many of them are all that good. That was supposed to be sarcasm and to show the stripes and pain on my back. But today's technology allows us to access traders cheaply. I can reproduce most hedge fund portfolios for well under 1%. And liquid and available in small chunks, readily accessible to smaller investors right on up to the biggest. And that's what we'll be explaining. In fact, I know what the portfolio will look like right now in general. There'll be a few little changes. The irony is that the business transactions around that and the regulatory transactions around that are 10 times more cumbersome than the actual, now that I finally figured out what I want to do after 3 years of really thinking about it and going from one thing to another, which is why I haven't written about investments, because for the last 3 years, it's only been in the last 4 months that I've had a clue. And I can't write about it now because I've got to go through all the regulatory and business stuff. First, you got to get all those I's dotted and T's crossed. So stay tuned for another 2 or 3 months, and you can actually see what I would like to do. Whether you want to participate or not is your choice. With that, let's go to questions. I don't even know how much time we have left. Yes, sir. I see this man in the purple up front. You are big. This is a man you can look up to.
So you say, with regards to diversification across asset classes, but going to do that with trading strategies, how are you going to minimize systemic risk if you go across trading strategies that you're not able to see?
Oh, you can see these. You'll see them. They'll be transparent on a daily basis. I've looked at their models. I mean, they're going to reveal you their past performance and their track records. They're not going to show you their algorithms, but I mean, I've looked at them. We're still, I don't think in the final portfolio, in the core portfolio, I'll be showing that there's an asset class we're not touching. The trading strategies make a decision whether to be in those asset classes or not, and how much to be allocated to them. And by diversifying among trading strategies, these are guys that that approach global markets in a fundamentally different way. And the irony is that the combination of them doesn't get you to the end of the race any faster, but it really reduces the volatility, because there's a rule that I've been looking at traders and investment managers and programs now for well over 25 years, choosing them, allocating among them, and so forth. 27 years. How long have we been at it, Pat? Pat worked for me like 4 times at various companies and then going to work for other companies. He's now back with me. 27 years we've been trying to figure out this stuff. And I've learned a few things, and one of them is that no trading strategy works all the time. I know that's a shock. And it's frustrating if you choose one. But I began to, I'm pretty good with numbers, and I began to say, wait a minute, if I meld these, I get and I found out that 4 seems to be about the best. I don't really get any more. The ride doesn't get much smoother with 5 or 6. 4 seems to be about, I'm not saying that I can't find the next latest and greatest, which may mean I just want to get rid of one of my 4 and put them in. But, so that's what I'm diverse. All these guys attack global portfolios, but they just do it in fundamentally different ways. Yes?
So just real quick, because I know there's other people. So you talked about earlier that the currency that will win is one that mirrors global GDP across that. It sounds like what you're trying to do is actually mirror that through your diversification of trading strategies.
Well, yes, but the problem is, in most places in the U.S., well, in all places in the U.S., I'll be mirroring a dollar-denominated trading strategy. Now, when we go to Europe, because we'll offer this in Europe and we'll offer this in Australia and other places like that over time, and I'll be delivering a euro or an Aussie dollar or a Canuck or a loonie or a peso portfolio. And so you're stuck with your currency portfolio, or you're stuck making a currency choice, because I can't tell you what currency you want to be in. So a global currency gives me a global GDP and gives me globally over long periods of time if I want to hold an asset 20, 30, 40 years. Now, I may, because it's a trading currency, and the decision becomes remarkably over time less friction, i.e. every time I move in and out, there's not much drag from the economy, because Google and Facebook will be competing with JP Morgan and Societe Generale and Barclays. And you're just going to trade your monies with whoever offers you the least friction, the least cost. So you can make a decision. I want to hold, and I was telling George at lunch yesterday that if it was my choice, I would name the new currency the Guilder. and as a pun on the Netherlands currency, the Dutch currency, which was the first true global currency other than the gold, but was the Guilder, but he's understood the importance of the blockchain. So you can decide whether to hold guilders or dollars or euro, or there won't be a euro. That was supposed to have been funny, guys. But, or pesos or whatever you want to choose, and it'll be frictionless, okay? Or you can just say, this is an asset that I'm going to be passing on to my children, and I know that global GDP will still be there. So, it's, right now, I put $100 every month into my grandchildren's savings account, and it goes into gold in a physical deposit, physical gold in Zurich. Okay, because I'm not certain what the dollar will look like in 20 or 25 years. That may be, when we look back on it in 2037, a really bad choice. I should have put it in dollars, and my grandkids will be asking me, Papa John, why didn't you give us dollars? What were you thinking? Or they may be looking and go, wow, you were a genius. Yeah, you think that's right because you think gold is going to be the answer. But you know something? If we knew, we'd be prescient, and I'm not.
The key word was think, because I don't suggest that I know.
Yeah, but you believe. You believe. I'm going to get you all to walk down the aisle and donate in a minute. Next question. Yes, sir. I see that hand.
What is the scenario that we get interest rates back up to historical level, 3.5%, 4%, 5%?
The complete discrediting of central banks and Keynesian philosophy. And that will happen at some crisis point, I believe, in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, one of the problems about writing about the future is sometimes the future arrives today, which was the title of the last BIS report. It was "The Future is Here Today," or something like that. Yeah, I mean, the future is starting to arrive much faster than we were taught. I mean, we owe $200 trillion in, our pension, and Medicare. We can't pay that. It's not going to happen. I mean, I'm not worried about paying it. Doesn't bother me. The far more interesting question is, what are we going to do when we finally recognize we can't pay it? I think a total joint global debt jubilee where all of the major central banks of the world, the top 5 or 6, agree to monetize debt at roughly the same pace, so their currencies stay roughly the same, which, by the way, will screw small central banks that don't have enough debt. They'll be penalized because they've been good guys. I mean, Switzerland is just, so upside down. Because they really don't, not only do they not have enough debt, it's already negative. They're negative out to 50 years. But it will be, unfortunately, chaotic. But if you see it coming, you can hedge. My view is that from where we are today to where we're going to be in 10 years, our goal is to get as much of our assets alive and intact for what will be after that restructuring. So after the 30s, we will have a phenomenal new run. We'll have reset the debt markets, just like we did, after the 1870s, just like we did after the 1930s were over and the deflation, both of those deflationary collapses. We'll have another one. And you want to be around for the next bull run. By the way, the end to my book on what the world will look like in 20 years is that none of us will want to come back to the good old days of 2017. We're definitely not going to want to come back to the archaic, dysfunctional medical system that we have that can't cure us of garbage. I'll give you some good news. How much time we got left? How much? 3 minutes. Good news. Some of you probably remember me talking about a company in West Covington, Kentucky, in Cincinnati, that has a potential cure for cancer. And it has taken 2 years to get it through the FDA, but last week we were approved. This company, I say we, I'm actually invested in it. So this is, when people ask me about it, somebody asked me about it last night, well, what do you think about this, John? And I'm going, okay, I've been criticizing for the last 30 minutes central bankers and other people for being true believers, and that you always have to be careful of allowing a true believer to tell you how to invest or do things. When it comes to this company, I'm a true believer. I bet way too much of my portfolio. I would never let a client do it. That being said, we'll be dosing human beings in September, and a year from now, I think we will have some good idea whether the world truly changes. By the way, if this works, it's a minimum of $500 billion off biotech market cap. Just a word of the warning, if you're in a biotech index fund that's heavily weighted to big pharma, that's heavily weighted to income from various cancer therapies and hospitals and all that stuff, the good news is they're going to lose a lot of money because we're going to have a bullet for cancer. Now, we don't know if it works on non-mass tumors. We just haven't had enough money to even test leukemia and bloodborne and those type of tumors. But on mass tumors in animals and in all of our tests, it appears to work on any mass tumor. Pancreatic, brain glioma, it goes past the blood-brain barrier for brain gliomas. That's how I first became involved. We sadly lost a young 25-year-old rocket scientist that we couldn't get the drug for because of the rules and availability, and he died. This is your government at work. I don't want to replace the FDA. Reform the FDA. I want to replace them. I just want to move them out. I want to design a 21st century. If Trump really wants to make America great again, get rid of the FDA and allow our biotech companies free reign within pretty wide guidelines to experiment and create and get rid of this 19th century phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 model where you have to spend a billion, 300 million, 400 million, $1 billion before you can get an effective drug. It's just insane. You reform this system, any group of you can come together with $10, $20 million and you can create a drug that can change everything for that group of people. You don't have to think about how do I raise. I'm on a board of a biotech company. We're going through phase 2 now. We've got to raise about another 10, 12 million. And then if we have a successful phase 2, then we got to figure out how to raise 100, 150 million for a phase 3. That's insane. If we get through a phase 2 and can do a phase 3, we will have pretty much demonstrated our drug works and it'll cure cure cirrhosis of the liver. There is no drug. Why should we be forced to wait? Anyway, just personal opinion. One last question, and then she's going to throw me out because she's tougher and meaner than I am. Yes, sir.
Why not concentrate on
Oh, that is absolutely the best thing. And you know, we could drop healthcare costs in America roughly 20 to 25% if we would do 5 things. If you would get up off your derriere and walk 3 to 5 miles a day, if you would stop smoking, if you would eat healthy, if you would do some kind of meditation, you know, or something to de-stress your life, do something to get rid of stress, and take your medicines, for God's sake. Do you know how many people end up back in the hospital just because they don't take their prescribed medicine? It's insane. A 25-cent or 50-cent pill, and then they don't take it and they end up with a $1,000 hospital visit.
Or you can do 4 minutes of exercise per day.
Well, you can do 4 minutes of exercise, but it'd be better to do a little more. I understand they've got that machine, you know, but you still got to get more cardio and everything in. Gentlemen, I'm going to go down to Starbucks and have a Frappuccino if anybody wants to come by and join me. I'm not drinking till I finish my book, so I'm a cheap date right now. Thank you.